Okay, so um, lead is a surprisingly global pollutant. Um, Lead's like all over the economy. It's kind of shocking, and it ends up in the atmosphere a lot. Um, it makes gasoline better. So all over the world, people still use leaded gasoline. In the U.S., we've banned that, but it's all one atmosphere, and many other countries still use leaded gas. And as a matter of fact, you can still buy it in the United States. You're just not supposed to sell it at most gas stations. Um, Historically, it was used really often in paint, a bunch of consumer products like plastic and stuff. Um, and lead's like a globally very common metal, so any mine will usually encounter some lead. And when you're melting um, like gold out of rocks, that's called smelting. You should probably know this. Smelting is when you heat up ore to release metal. There's often lead associated with other metals, so it's kind of all over the atmosphere. Um, it makes really small particulates in the air. It can be translated to gas form, but that's really high temperatures. So usually what we're talking about is particulate matter. Um, Little ashes, when you're burning fossil fuels, there will be a little piece of lead that you didn't melt, and so it just goes up into the air in ash form. Um, and so from the atmosphere, lead deposits into water and soil. Um, when some chemistry happens, it can be methylated and then become absorbable. So it works its way into food webs. Um, the effects are all to the nervous system. You should probably know that. And that's why it's so dangerous for children, because their nervous system is still developing. So especially in kids, it affects cognition, behavior, like physical movement, the control of the body, reflexes, recall, memory. Um, so yeah, all over the planet we melt metals. So all over the planet we use lead. So even though the United States has a ban on leaded gasoline, it's in the atmosphere from those sources. We have some surprising exposures in the United States that you should really know about. One of them is in demolition. So there used to be all this like government housing in big cities that's being torn down. And in some places like Baltimore and Detroit, entire neighborhoods will get demolished at once. Part of urban revival. Um, and in some of these cities, when you demolish a big old building, there's just so much paint dust, right? From like painting the walls and the exterior and the interior. And when you like blow that up, the cloud of stuff that comes out often has a lot of lead. So it's sort of a surprising detail. But in some of America's biggest cities, because we're tearing down buildings, you have some of the highest lead levels found anywhere in the world. Um, Another one that you've probably heard about um, is that in the United States, a lot of old plumbing is lead. That's actually common even in Santa Barbara. Just plumbing was made out of lead. I think I've told you, I make lead sinkers for fishermen. And so a lot of the lead that I get is from old plumbing. You know, Lead is really flexible, it's easy to work with. So people used to like build your house's custom plumbing out of lead on the spot. Um, and that actually makes fine plumbing. It's not necessarily bad for you, except that as we're forced to use dirtier and dirtier drinking water in our municipal water supply, we have to treat it more. And treated water is often acidic. And you should remember from a previous study goal that acid rain accelerates the erosion of heavy metals, and water treatment often makes the municipal drinking water supply acidic. So now when you run acidic tap water through lead pipes, you've got Flint, Michigan. A place where we basically distributed lead poisoning to a whole entire city for a long, long time. And when people started to notice the city didn't have the money to fix the problem, and so Flint, Michigan still, in December of 2020, still has lead poisoning in their tap water. I hope someone watches this video in the future and says, oh man, that's fixed now. Jose's got to change his video. I can't wait for that to be outdated. There's a couple of surprising exposures. There's a lot of lead in solder. So like if you've ever seen a motherboard and on one side it's got all the chips and you flip it over and it's green with all those little tiny dimples, that's mostly lead. And so a lot of electronics manufacturing has really significant lead levels. And usually electronics manufacturing is modern construction with a lot of regulations. So usually that's filtered. But in some parts of the world where electronics are made in less regulated and less modern settings, people can get a lot of exposure there. There's some types of mining where people who work underground and use like grinding tools can be exposed to lead dust. And so you breathe it and then it gets into your blood. That's really bad. But a super shocker. In the United States, some of the highest lead exposure is indoor shooting ranges. Because there's a lot of lead in gunpowder. So like people who work in the military on the firing line, training people how to shoot their rifles and stuff, they end up breathing that little puff of exhaust that comes out of a handgun or a rifle after it fires. That little puff of exhaust, if you spend a lot of time around that, that can be a really significant lead exposure too. A place that we don't really get lead poisoning, where you might think we would, is surface water and ocean contamination. You know, like fishermen like myself, we drop it in the ocean, but the ocean, even though it's becoming more acidic, is still overall basic. So it's become less basic. Acidification in the ocean is real, but that doesn't mean it's overall an acidic medium. It's just acidified from very basic to less basic. So in the ocean, lead just grows like a white crust and doesn't interact with the water. And likewise, if you leave lead sitting outside and all that happens is clean rain falls on it, then generally that would not erode very much at all, unless the rain happens to be very acidic in your neighborhood. So I guess that's why batteries are such a big whoop, like car batteries, because that acid that's in the battery is in contact with lead. And so that does have lead in the acid. And if you break open a battery and you play with that lead has been exposed to acids, that erodes a lot. So make sure that you handle car batteries correctly. That is a really serious source of lead poisoning. Okay, lead video.